Afternoon, everybody, and welcome to AILO's last webinar in its autumn series. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Simon Willoughby, deputising for Bob Payne, who's away this week. Today, we have somebody well known to the AILO family. It's Andrew Hubbard, Chief Business Development Officer at Lumera, a Swedish insurtech business, and also a Spurs fan. So we won't hold that against him. Andrew's going to be covering the key findings of the recent AILO Digital Futures, the AILO Technology Report, which was based on a survey of AILO members that looked at the next generation technology for insurers and the biggest challenges in implementing it. Andrew will also introduce the new Digital Futures Special Interest Group, which has sort of flowed from his original report. We'll hear more from Andrew in a few moments, but just first of all, a few housekeeping issues. I need to remind you that the session is being recorded and it will be available to view shortly after we finish. You'll be sent a link together with the presentation, which you can also forward on to your colleagues. And there's CPD certificates available as well. As it's a webinar, if you want to ask a question directly of Andrew, can you please use the chat facility that's on the Zoom toolbar? And I'll ask the question on your behalf as time allows. So Andrew's going to chat to us for about 25, 30 minutes, followed by questions, but we aim to get finished by 12:45 at the latest, so we won't keep you too long. As I say, this is the last webinar in this series, and we hope to bring you some more interesting and stimulating topics in the spring of 2024. So on to today's speaker. Since 2014, Andrew Hubbard has been CEO of AI London, an award-winning insurtech, which was acquired in May 2022 by Lumera, a Swedish insurtech business with 60% of the Nordic market. Andrew has a successful track record as an investor in and advisor to a portfolio of fast-growing private companies, and his topic today is, as I've said earlier, so I say, Andrew, how long we've known each other? Must be 15 years now, so yeah.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah, we've grown old together, if not graceful. So yeah. So anyway, over to you, Andrew, and thank you.
I think Spurs haven't won anything since we've known each other, have they?
No,
Anyway,
but then my team hasn't been
that.
doing well in the last 10 years either, so there we go. Yeah.
No more football. Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. I'm also acting as a recruitment agent because we're keen that as many of you as possible can join our special interest group for digital futures. I picked that term because I think Bob wanted it to be IT managers roundtable or something like that. And the world of tech and how it's relevant to AILO members is changing dramatically, and how we take advantage of that, I think, is increasingly become a collective challenge because of the sheer volume of new initiatives that are hitting us, and we'll go through some of those. I work for Lumera, this big Swedish insurtech, so I know in dealing with many of you, the scale of your provider is key, and we've gone from 30 people to 400, so I'm in a bigger organization. Nikki, if you could move to the next slide, please. What we're going to cover today is, to give some background, I'd like to go through a device that I find quite useful, which calls on 6 bold actions for insurers from McKinsey. Then we'll have a look at what the AILO technology survey revealed, some additional common challenges that people talked about in their responses and have talked to me directly about. Then where I feel that leads us to focus, and then an open question to really all of you, which is how we should proceed. And the core challenge there is technology can be a significant differentiator, but I'm also going to argue there are some common interests we have that mean we should work together to address to take advantage of some of these technology, not just work independently and see it as unique competitive advantage. Nikki, if we can move on. So these McKinsey 6 bold actions, this is all pretty obvious, but I think it's interesting because the pressure is, I think, on you. Where is the pain point? Is it in propositions, innovative propositions, such as are they available as an app? How easy is it for clients to engage, pick up when they haven't engaged for a while? We deal in a uniquely long-term events and triggers industry, and that means people aren't daily looking at our digital presence, whether through a web page or an app. But when they do, they still want that same level of ease of use and immediacy and ability to act. So speed to innovate is going to be key. The speed to digitally engage is key. Where we've seen over the last 5 years since we dedicated the whole of AI London to AI as a driver of our new business, was that whilst everyone talked about customer engagement and sales, they spent money on simplifying operations. And I think equally there are some very interesting technology developments that allow you to what we might call hyper automate some of what you do. I think this idea of optimized retention, there was a great example recently. Some of you, probably all of you, are aware that Uber has suddenly started selling train tickets. And I think Uber are about taxis, and here in London about food delivery, but I haven't used that. But Uber are taxis, so what's it with trains? And of course, what they identify was that many of their taxi journeys are to a train station where someone has to get out and either during the journey or at the station perhaps buy a ticket. So why not let them make the whole journey? And I think that's a really interesting technology driver for us, because where in the chain are our customers engaging with somebody else who, if we partner with them or offered that function, we could take more of the wallet share. And as we used to say when I worked in telco years ago, if someone took one product, they were highly likely to churn. If they took 2 or 3, it dramatically reduced. I think tied in with this, but this is more about people than tech, because once you've got half decent tech, you can be agile, but that's a state of mind. And finally, something we should never forget, and is causing great tension, the Sam Altman issues over the last few weeks. I think you could argue around, did some of his now released board members think he was not being compliant enough with some state of regulatory control? So Nicky, if we can move on. I thought I'd just give you a sort of touch to reality. These are all AI-driven additions to the life and pension value chain that we've already put into production. So they're fairly obvious, but voice of the consumer is an opportunity for you to gauge either your own products or competitor products, what's being said about them, wherever data is available publicly, on newspaper finance pages, on websites, on your own website. It's a powerful tool to let you know any tweaks, because as you may know, or I should explain, AI is good at reading the sentiment of what people are saying. It can read a sentence and say that's positive or negative at a simple level, and that's what voice of the consumer is bringing through. External data optimization recognizes that as we're all in a chain, so we get data from distributors or banks or other parts of the ecosystem, the more automated we can make the receipt of that data, whether it's tabular or based in an email, again, AI can read those, understand what they are, understand their contacts, and send the data items to the relevant place, such as your policy admin platform. Optimal fund selection is fairly straightforward. Reduced risk of lapse is known to you all. When we were piloting this 3 years ago, we were working with a Caribbean client who found out the highest level of risk of lapse, which they didn't know about, was women in their mid-30s. And under analysis, there were people getting divorced who had no idea what the premiums they were paying into a life policy were about and cancelled it. So now they sell to that community and make sure they know the value should anything, which in the Caribbean seems slightly more likely, is going to happen in the mid-30s. Claims processing, again, that's taking advantage of AI's ability to read documents, but also read PDFs and certificates. Finally, achieving good outcomes are very UK focused, but it's relevant, I think, to us and across Europe, is about recognizing this move towards a compliance demand to understand what a good outcome is going to be for a policyholder. Nikki, if I can move on. So what did the survey reveal? 3 interesting pain points. To come back to an earlier comment, winning new clients was a clear priority. And here we get into that complex dynamic of where's the digital relationship? Is it through an IFA? Is it through an intermediary? Yet that client is your policyholder. So how do you make sure, or indeed do you make it attractive for them to have a direct relationship with you digitally? This one isn't a surprise, but still leapt out, which is the lack of skilled people. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges facing our market. And that is, you have to have a level of understanding and expertise within your organization, even if you then outsource who builds your technical and digital components, indeed who may run them. But there is this broader lack of ability to attract people. And this is true across all industries. And we've been fortunate at AI London Lumera to have a relationship with City University. And every one of our now 15 data scientists went to City and joined us through the program we run with them for PhD and master's students. And coming on to why do we need a special interest group? Well, 90% saw that technology was crucial. The other people thought it was important. Nobody said don't bother, but it is seen as a driver of value in the future that we should really start to focus on and get a shared, where appropriate, understanding. Nikki, if we can have the next slide, please. It also revealed these common challenges, and this is just stating the same in a slightly different manner. Business development pressures, operational risk through obsolete technology. Again, if you adopt the right level of modern AI-powered technology, that can actually make the migration from, or indeed continued use of, older legacy technology easier, because it intelligently goes and understands the data that is supplied from those systems. Digitalization, we've talked about, the overriding pressure for process efficiency. That's not just to reduce operating costs, but also where you're process inefficient, the digital world exposes that to customers. They spot that it takes longer for something that they assume is going to be easy to take. And the constant pressure for cost reductions. Okay, Nikki. So where does this take us for the special interest group? And again, I'm here as a recruiting sergeant. Please come and join this committee and help shape how we address these groupings of what we saw. Around the cost reduction and process efficiency is this idea of hyper automation. How do you put that in? I think a good way to think about a lot of these technical initiatives is they need a co-pilot, not an autopilot. So this isn't about people removal, it's about making them more efficient and speeding up delivery processes. We've talked about digitization. I see that as the use of personal devices and this whole focus around a customer-centric relationship with your client. Finally, onto future-proofing. And here, this could be a very interesting area, but it's also the most challenging. It's technologies such as the use of AI, the use of blockchain and smart contracts. That has its values, it has its risks. But this, in conversation with some of you around where might we focus, is beginning to give us the core of what we would seek to discuss at our special interest group meetings. Okay, Nikki, let's go to the next slide. So this might be much more a rugby match, Simon, than a football match, in that we could get through this with some speed. I'm keen that where appropriate we have physical meetings. We're going to try and get together at least 3-4 times a year, once a quarter, and then the pulse rate is what you as a group feel is appropriate. Monthly, every 2 months, that's something for us to work out. The areas that I think it's our job to work collectively on, not mine to in any way lead or dictate or push or impose, are how we collaborate. I think technology is one of those areas where the sharing of best practice, which is going to be around papers and initiatives, videos that are constantly coming out, that we collectively become aware of, that we're happy to share. I'm keen with Nikki and Simon to set up a platform where we can share digitally things we think are of value to our colleagues. And I think it will be very clear as that develops what type of tools and what sort of information people find most interesting. I think also I'm keen to hear from you what your desired outcomes are from engagement in a digital futures special interest group. What do you want to know? How to find people? Do you want to know what to do? Do you want to know how to take advantage of certain technologies? I think if we can get a clear view together of what the primary shared desired outcomes are, we'll be more successful. I think, as I've mentioned before, the degree to which we collaborate, what are we comfortable sharing? I'm conscious from my work in other areas, for example, with the ABI and EIOPA, that some of the very biggest national players are able to take advantage of their scale to do things with modern technology, such as have the sheer volume of data that they can train their AI models more readily, that we might find it's easier to collaborate, to share data where it's training new models such as AI for a common value for the whole AILO community, not just for an individual member. So what we can share becomes a very interesting discussion. And again, when and where we meet, I think we could travel around from the Isle of Man, Liechtenstein, London, Dublin, wherever, to make this a very engaging and relevant community.
Andrew, can I just come in and ask a question? What sort of
Sure.
people are you looking for in relation to this digital futures SIG? Is it sort of TFL-headed techies, or are you looking for people involved in the front line? What is it?
It's open, and it's key we get a variety, because we need people who, from a technical perspective, are looking for support, guidance, input. But critically, this is such a big impact on business. We need the business line managers, product managers, customer service, marketing managers. There's a role for everybody within this. And I think something we might think about is to flag when we're talking on a subject that might be more or less relevant to a certain community, to get those business functions engaged on, say, when we're talking about social media and voice of the customer reviews.
Yeah. So I mean, if I came on one of these, I'm not going to get tech shamed by all the group for not.
I take it as a point of pride, I suppose, that I've worked in. I joined Hewlett Packard from college on the 5th of September 1983, and I've never written a line of code.
Yeah.
I have no technical skills, and understanding what its capabilities are is useful, but then how to engage with it. I think what might be useful is if the members within AILO identify a lead who joins the special interest group, who then can identify individuals within their company from marketing or product or underwriting, who could then join specific sessions where we talk about those functions.
Thank you.
So any broader questions? Am I getting any on the chat?
I mean, it's interesting how this particular survey and what's come from it, how the crossover with the distribution survey I did just before it, actually, which was really looking at attitudes towards AILO members, being prepared to look at different distribution channels. Again, a lot of the members of AILO, they have one distribution model. A lot of it involves independent financial advisors of various shapes and forms. We've got bancassurance, and there's some companies doing some quite innovative things across multiple channels. But for the most part, no, what we do is either distribution, whatever. And I think what really surprised me was the open-mindedness of a lot of the AILO members to actually look at different channels or additional channels. And so that I was interested to see from your report that the winning new clients thing was that was one of the key things that came out. It's use of technology, and I guess that goes together. Can you just elaborate a little more on that from the survey and the people survey being prepared to use some of this technology to do things which really they haven't really either wanted to or felt they were able to do in the past?
Yeah, I was not surprised, because it's been quite a common theme that the focus for the exploitation of new technologies through every wave of technology over the last 30 odd years has been, can I win or keep customers? I think that's a natural reaction to what's the biggest challenge I have? What's the most difficult thing to do? Win new customers. And so I think people are like, well, how will this set of new technologies, whether it's, I think an interesting example is something that you're all going to be familiar with Chat GPT, is how that can put your robo advisor or your chatbot, which are, I'd be interested to hear from the community. Do they find that sort of stuff useful? I've kind of crossed a Rubicon over the last few months where I quite like a chatbot because, you know, if I chat to it, it usually gives me an answer that I'm looking for quicker than hanging on. But I think things like Chat GPT are dangerous if they're used to build products or give advice, but quite useful in terms of being able to understand the language that someone is using and respond and guide them to a certain point. But I'll come back to the co-pilot idea. You've got to have real people who can readily step in when the chatbot that you've configured gets to a point where it's better to talk to someone than stray over into dangerous areas of bias or erroneous advice.
Yeah. And obviously we sort of see a lot of this stuff in the press, and we hear things like Chat GPT. But have you got any sort of insight in terms of what's coming next, particularly in relation to how it's likely to hit the life sector?
I think I think it's going to be a very interesting area of discussion for the special interest group, because as it gets more capable and more reliable, being able to take advantage of it to perform highly specific and low risk in terms of it doing the wrong thing interactions with customers and advisors could be a real value to our members. If I think of other areas of technology, one that could address this skills shortage is the dramatic introduction of low code, no code, which the idea that, well, if you think when you engage with some of the Google or Chat GPT platforms, you don't have to have any programming skills. You talk to it and ask it what to do. Well, there are coding platforms where you can engage at a similar level and say, write me, I've done this with Chat GPT, write me a program to automate the receipt of this sort of API. And our programmers are beginning to, we have to be very cautious about this, but use automated tools to automate their coding. It's just quicker to do than them write lines of code, and often more reliable and more efficient. So there are platforms of what's called low code, no code that I think AILO members who have this resource challenge would be smart to understand and possibly adopt. Low code, no code.
Doing your staff out of a job. Helping them in their co-piloting.
You've got your black hat on, Simon. Or allowing me to produce code without the very expensive programmers that I've got.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, in terms of other technological innovations coming down the line from different sectors, whatever, you got any thoughts on that?
I think the last area that has been a bit of a surprise is the degree to which non-insurance companies are starting to look seriously at pushing insurance products. Now, this has happened in the general space. Tesla offering motor insurance and General Motors offering motor insurance, but also Amazon and others beginning to look at how they can offer general insurance products as part of their overall provision. And I think it won't be long before people eye up, what can I do in the long term events and triggers market to grab a bit more. So I think that we've all been conscious of the competitors we have next door, but I think there's an interesting dynamic where technology, where it's excessively exploited by certain companies, can get them into new markets, and that's something I think we should keep a keen eye on.
I think it's always been felt that the potential's been there to do that for what seems like ages, but if you're in the industry, they're not hidden barriers to entry, but they're sort of less visible to the outside world in terms of, I'm talking about regulation, compliance.
Yeah.
So that I think no one on this call will disagree that any of the companies you've mentioned have got the capability to do this. But again, and maybe our sector's being complacent in thinking, well, yeah, as soon as they really have a pretty close look at it, they won't want to go anywhere near it when they find out they have to 25% of their staff have to be in compliance to deal with it. Have you got any views on those? You say from a technology point of view, yeah, this is it, and these people can't do this.
I think the reality is that if they see it as attractive enough, and there are certain elements of our industry that will look very attractive to an external party, then you might take over a business in order to get that skill.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happened in other lines where they have moved into that space.
Yeah.
They have aggressively gone out and mopped up a series of regulatory providers. We've seen that in the consulting space where regulatory firms have been swallowed up by a big tech business in order to fulfill that sort of requirement for a separate line of business they set up in order to meet those ratio requirements that you described. So that's how you get around it. You buy it in. And I think that's what we've seen in general insurance.
Good. Okay. Well, I think that's been very interesting. And thank you to Andrew, and thank you to everyone who's taken the time out of their busy schedule to do this. The advert for the special, the Digital Future Special Interest Group is unashamed, and I think we've learned that if we decide to become part of it, we're not going to be tech shamed by anyone, and that Andrew's looking for a sort of broad base of experience to do that. And so I think all that remains for me to say is thank you to Andrew again, and we hope to see many of you again in the spring on the next series of AILO webinars. Thank you, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.